Hello everybody and welcome to Lesson 5 in the Gledholt Male Voice Choir Learning to Read Music series of videos. This is probably one of the last videos that will concentrate almost solely on rhythm. Obviously it's one of the most important bits. Rests show us when not to sing, how long to observe a silence for. So the video will go through how long rests last for, what they look like, and how to count the spaces between the bits that you're singing. So, without further ado, make yourself comfortable, get on a pair of headphones, grab a sheet of paper to make notes if you want, and at the end there are links on the email giving you some PDF exercises which you can do to check your learning to make sure that I'm putting this across as well as that I might. But in the meantime, enjoy. Hello everybody, this is Gledholt Male Voice Choir's Reading Music video number 5 in the series, and this one is about rests. What will we learn? In this lesson we're going to learn about rests, as we've said. So what are rests? Why are they important? We're going to learn what they look like, and we're going to learn how to count them. So what are they? A rest is an instruction in a musical score which shows us when not to sing. In other words, they indicate silence. So what do they look like? Well, basically, we could say that they're symbols within the bar that don't look like one of the 5 notes we've learnt so far, so they're not a semibreve, a minim, crotchet, quaver or semiquaver. Let's start with a crotchet rest. As we all know, a crotchet represents one beat in any of the 3 time signatures we've learnt. The crotchet rest is a fancy vertical squiggle. There it is. That squiggle shows a silence of one single beat. So in a 4/4 time signature it would look like this. There is a bar of music in 4/4 and we're going up a scale. It's an A, then a B, then there's a crotchet rest, and then there's a D. We sing the first 2 crotchet beats, rest for 1 crotchet, and then sing the last beat of the bar. Our simple maths lets us count all 4 beats in the bar, so 1 and 2 are the first 2 crotchets, the A and the B, then there is a crotchet rest, and then the D is the 4th crotchet of that bar in the 4/4 time signature. The same can be done in 3/4 time, so we have the same scale in 3/4 time. We've got the A, the B, and then a crotchet rest. All 3 of those, the first 2 crotchets and the crotchet rest, all add up to the 3 beats of the 3/4 time signature. So that squiggle is used whenever we rest for a single crotchet beat in any of the time signatures. This is a minim rest. It's longer than a crotchet rest, and the minim rest lasts for 2 crotchet beats. In exactly the same way that a minim lasts for 2 crotchets, a minim rest lasts for 2 crotchet rests. It sits on the middle of the stave, and we'll go into that a bit later, and is exactly as we'd expect. We see a minim rest in a 3/4 time bar, just like this. So here we are, 3/4, this time we're in the bass clef. So again, we're starting on an A, remember that the space above the bottom line is an A in the bass clef. A for 1 crotchet. Then there are 2 beats of rest, as indicated by that minim rest sitting on the middle line of the stave. So we could count the beats in there. 1 on the A, then 2 and 3 are rested, as indicated by the minim rest sitting on the middle line of the stave. In 4/4 it works exactly the same. Here we have, we're back to the treble clef now. We've still got that scale starting this time on the A on the treble clef, A, then a minim rest. So 2 beats of rest, the minim rest sitting, as we've said, on the middle line of the stave. 2 beats rest, and then the 4th beat of the bar, the D, is a single crotchet. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Adding up to the 4 beats for the 4/4 time signature. In each case we can count and add up the beats to give us the full bar time value. Now we're on to the semi-breve rest, which is nominally worth 4 crotchet beats. Now there is a reason I have put nominally, as you will find out in a minute. It hangs from the line above the middle of the stave. There it is. Hanging from the line above the middle of the stave, that is a semi-breve rest in a 4/4 time signature and indicates that we rest for 4 beats. All 4 beats in that bar are a rest. Now you'd think that was all there was to it, and you'd think you'd only see it in a 4/4 time signature, but as I hinted earlier, it means slightly more than just the four beats. You'll other see it in other time signatures because it indicates a full bar rest in any time signature that you see. But most specifically because we're learning, we've only really done the 3/4, the 2/4 and the 4/4 time signatures. We understand that semi-breve rest hanging, as we've said, from the line above the middle line on the stave indicates a full bar of rest in any of our 3 time signatures. So in these examples, you'll need to know the time signature to count the beats, the number of beats that rest indicates. So here we are in a 2/4 time signature. The first 2, again, we're back in the bass clef, and again we're singing an A and a B. 1, 2, then we're into the next bar. We need 2 beats in that bar because we're in a 2/4 time signature, and there it is, the full bar rest hanging from the line above the middle line of the stave. So although we could indicate that 2 beats rest with a minim, convention states that we don't. We indicate that full bar of rest by putting the semi-breve rest into the bar, and as we've said, it hangs from the line above the middle line of the stave. Same in this example. Here we are again in 3/4 time. Once again, we've got 1 crotchet beat on an A. We've then a minim rest, which means that we're resting for beats 2 and 3 of that bar, and then for the next bar, that semi-breve or full bar rest hanging from the line above the middle line indicates a full bar of rest. So it doesn't just mean 4 beats, it can mean a full bar rest in any time signature. Now, the minim rest and the semi-breve rest look both very similar. How can we remember the difference? Well, the answer is lurking in the dark corners. I know it's a pretty cute mouse, but there we have a little mouse, and he's sitting on the floor, running along the floor of his tunnel. And next to him, we have a spider hanging from the ceiling. Why is this important? Because M stands for mouse and stands for minim. S stands for spider and is the start of semi-breve. So there we have it. We have the mouse running along the floor and the spider hanging from the ceiling. So M for mouse or minim, that's on the line, sits on the line, the middle line of the stave, and the semi-breve or full bar rest, as we've now learnt, hangs from the line above the middle line of the stave. I hope that's done enough now for us to remember the difference between the two. They are just black oblongs, but that's how to remember which is which. M for mouse and minim, S for spider or semi-breve. So, let's move on to quaver and semi-quaver rests. The quaver rest looks like this. It looks like a 7 that's been written by someone with a quill pen that's blotted as they've started. That lasts as long as a quaver would in the same time signature and a tempo. In other words, half a crotchet beat. So that is silence lasting the same length as a quaver, so that is a quaver rest and lasts, as we know, half a crotchet beat. And you'll see them in any time signature. Now the semi-quaver rests look like this. You'll see in exactly the same way that quavers and semi-quavers have a differing number of flags. Here, quaver rests and semi-quaver rests, you add a flag each time you halve the value. So the quaver rest has a single splodge, the The semiquaver rest has 2 splodges or 2 flags. I know they're flags, but I like to think that Bart, when he wrote his with his quill pen, probably splotted at the beginning, and there we have the double splodge indicating a semiquaver rest. Now the silence lasts as long as a semiquaver would, in other words, 1/4 of a crotchet or half a quaver. So we've put this in so that we can make notes. We can remind ourselves what the actual note values look like if we're singing the music and what the rests look like if we aren't. So a semi-breve or full bar looks like the black oblong hanging from the line above the middle line of the stave. The minim rest lasts exactly the same as a minim, and that is sitting on the line in the middle of the stave. The crotchet rest, there we have the crotchet rest, which is the fancy squiggle. We have the quaver, which is the blotty pen 7, and then we have the semiquaver, which is the blotty pen 7 with an extra flag. So I hope that's made it interesting enough to remember what they look like. So why are rests important? Rests are part of the rhythm of a piece of music. Silence can be used to punctuate a rhythmic phrase, and we're going to look into some examples of this in a minute. In multi-part music, they can change the entire dynamic feel by having one's voice or section singing on its own, while the others are resting. They can create staggered entries and phrases, and we'll go on to a very familiar example of that. The possibilities are endless. Rests can be used for all sorts of things, and it's in the mind of the composer, but it's all about when you don't sing. But the important thing for us in order to interpret the music correctly is to know when to sing, how long to sing for, and just as importantly, when not to sing. So when to observe those silences and when to start singing again. So rests, we need to learn how to interpret rests and incorporate them in how we're reading the music that we're singing. Here's a fine familiar example. I think it's a Gledholt favourite. We all know well, that is One Moment in Time. Now you'll see at the beginning we have 4 full rests of silence while the tenors listen to the intro awaiting their time to come in. So there's 4, each of those 4 bars has a full bar of rest as indicated by the black oblong, the spider hanging from the line above the middle line, a full bar or a semi-breve rest. The last bar of that top line, we'll see the minim rest. There we go, the little mouse sitting on the middle line, the minim rest indicating 2 full beats of rest. Then we've got a quaver rest. There's the little blotty 7. That indicates a quaver rest because the first note the tenors are coming in on, is halfway through beat 3. It's important that they come in halfway through beat 3, as we'll learn in a minute. Beat 4 in that bar is indicated, and again we're talking about groups of notes, and we learnt in the last lesson that a group of notes, generally speaking, are written to create 1 beat's worth. So there is 1 beat's worth of quavers at the end of that first bar. So how do the rests affect the rhythm in this piece? The quaver rest creates a break in the phrase and helps to offset the rhythm so that an emphasis falls on certain notes within the phrase, and I'll go through what I mean by that here. Let's count it. We can add up all the notes and rests to conclude we're in common time, or look back at the key signature on the previous slide, of course. But here we are. Here is just one isolated line of that, and we know that at this point that the tenors are singing because there's a treble clef, and we know that they're singing on an E. So in that first bar in that line, they're singing the word live for 2 beats on an E. Then there's a quaver rest indicated, and then once again the phrase starts halfway through the 3rd beat of that 4/4 time signature. The cluster of notes, as we learnt, groups of notes are clustered in single beats. So we know, although we haven't learnt about dotted notes yet, we know from what we've learnt, or we can certainly have an inspired guess, that those 2 notes clustered together represent 1 full beat. So count them again. We've got the minim for 1 and 2 we've got the quaver rest for the first half of beat 3, and in the second half of beat 3, the tenors come in on the E, I. And it's only a short note, it's a quaver, it's half a beat. And we know that we go up to the F, want to be, to sing the rest of that phrase. I want to is one beat, and then B is the first 2 beats of the next bar. Now, we learnt before, from what we learnt about meter, that if we're in a 4/4 time signature, that meter means that we emphasize slightly the first beat of each bar. So in this example, we see that the composer has written the music so that the important notes within the phrase, within the sentence or the lyric that he's singing, the important notes are emphasized by being placed right at the beginning of every bar. So here we've got live, I want to be, a day to give, the best of me. So we hear how the rests punctuates and gives us a chance to breathe. I've deliberately breathed at each of those quaver rests because it puts further emphasis on the interest in the rhythm of the phrase, and it tells us we're singing it in little blocks, little bouncy blocks. I want to be, a day to give, the best of me. And that's why those rests are so important within that piece. So we can see how the beats fall. How does that affect the rhythm? Well, as we've said, look at the piano part playing on the beat at this part of the piece. The accompaniment is providing a beat, but the quaver rest tells us to start singing halfway through beat 3 to make the phrases interesting. So we've used it to punctuate. We've seen how rests are used to punctuate and to alter the rhythm and the feel of a piece of music. Another great example of how important it is to read them correctly is our latest favourite, which is Great is Thy Faithfulness. Now, although the rests are used slightly differently, he's still using the rests here to put emphasis on the most important words. So here we're singing Thou Changest Not. We'll see we're singing that on beats 2, 3, 4, and the first beat of the next bar is where the not falls. So that emphasis is already there. That's also emphasised further by the crescendo mark, which is telling us we're getting louder throughout that phrase. And thou changest not. But more important than that is the fact that we finish singing not and then have a complete break of silence before we start the next phrase. Now, I suppose you get the same effect or something similar. You wouldn't miss it if you kept on singing not for 2 beats and then thy compassions they fail not. But here, the composer has very much intended us to emphasize that not because he's put a minute's silence. That means we must all put the T when we sing of not bang on the second beat of that bar. So it's thou changest not thy that by putting that rest there, he's saying we've got a consonant, sing your consonant, stop, and then complete the phrase, thy compassions they fail not. So how important is it that we observe the crotchet silence is used to add emphasis and completely isolate that phrase, thou changest not. It's so important, that phrase within the hymn, thou changest not. And all the more important for us that we learn to count the beats and to all pronounce the T at exactly the same time, then rest, then sing the next phrase. The silence before and after the phrase is vitally important. We've got to learn to count them carefully. More examples. Here we have staggered entries and another Gledholt Male Voice favourite, good old Vincent. And as we all know, it's tough to remember when you come in. There's another little learning point around this one which we'll go into. But here we see that the two tenor parts sing Now I Think I Know, then the baritones sing then Now I Think I Know, and then the basses sing Now I Think I Know. And in each case, we've got the minim rest before the tenors sing. The minim, don't forget, sitting there like a mouse on the middle line of the stave before they then sing. We've got to be in 4/4 here because there's a minim rest, 1, 2, and then Now I, grouped together as one beat, Think I, quavers grouped together as beat 4 of that phrase. So Now I Think I Know, and tenors are going to hold that for 4 full beats, the semi-breve. Then into the next bar, they're going to tie that over and sing another 2 beats. Look at the second tenors, they're observing that same minim rest. Then Now I, Think I, beats 3 and 4, as we know they're clustered together. No, two minims in that bar for a 4/4. Now look at the baritone line. Rest hanging from the line above the middle line of the stave, so we know that that's a spider and it's a semi-breve rest, so it's a full bar rest. We're in 4/4, we've got to be. So there we go, 4 full beats rest for the baritones. So they're counting 1, 2, 3, 4. The tenors are counting 1, 2, Now I Think I. The second tenors, 1, 2, Now I Think I. The baritones, 1, 2, 3, 4, Now I Think I. And the basses are counting, despite the fact that for some reason the copy has failed to put the semi-breve rest in that first bar for the basses. Just imagine, if you will, that it's there. Wish I'd noticed that before I put it on the slide. The basses are counting a full bar of rest, 1, 2, 3, 4. Then into bar 2, they've got a minim rest, 1, 2, Now I Think I. So we all know that creates that cascading phrase, Now I Think I, Now I Think I, Now I Think I Know. And those rests show us how long to wait for before we start singing. Now, count the beats before you start singing so you know when to come in. But, I hear you all say, we can hear the tenors singing. We know how long to count for. Well, that's fine, until we find ourselves, as we have done occasionally, we find ourselves standing in concert formation and suddenly realise we can't actually hear what the basses are singing, or the tenors can't hear what the baritones are singing, or the basses can't hear what the baritones are singing, so we've got to become independent. We may not even be able to hear the piano all that well. There have been times where people have complained, but I can't hear the piano. You watch the conductor and you count the beats. So you can take your masters of your own destiny as long as you know how to count the rests. So in this example, the basses are counting a full bar of rest, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, Now I Think I Know. And provided you're confident that you are on the beat, you know when to come in without being able to hear anybody else singing. So that's another trick we can use, another little bit in our armoury in becoming better musicians. We don't have to depend. Also, what happens if the tenors have got it wrong and they've come in a beat early or a beat late or half a beat early? So long as we're on the beat, we've got it right. We are counting. We've learnt to count the rests before we start to sing, and we've observed silence through them. So what have we learned? We've learnt that rests indicate silence. We've learnt that rests have different time values, exactly the same as the notes, and we learnt what those values look like. We can go back to the slide with all the comparisons of each rest shape. We've learnt, more importantly, how to count them. We know how to incorporate them into the full count of the bar. We've learnt how important they are. We've learnt how the arranger or the composer uses rests to add to the rhythm and the interest and the emphasis of the piece. Exercise time. There are 5 exercises attached to the email that I sent. Print them out and have a go. They test your ability to recognise rests and understand their time values. They also test what you learnt earlier about time signatures and bar lines, so at this stage we're putting together everything we know about rhythm to get a better understanding of written music and how we interpret it. So that's it for now. Thanks for watching, And before we get to the next rehearsal, once again, go through your music scores and identify all the rhythm knowledge we've accrued so far. You won't just be concentrating on rests, because as we're building this knowledge base along, you're recognizing how to count, how to add stuff, how our maths works, how we're going to get, how we're going to understand the rhythm within the music that we're singing. Most importantly, put it into practice. Next time you sing a piece with rests, make a special point of singing all the notes to exactly the right length and counting the rests before you start singing again. It's all very well learning a phrase, but we've got to be accurate. We've got to observe the silences, because, as we've learnt, the silences are important. We don't want to oversing rests. If we're oversinging rests, then all the consonants are falling in the wrong place and it sounds sloppy. If we're learning the rests correctly and the length of the notes as we've now done correctly, we can make our singing more accurate and better. Now that you know why we have rests, we need to use them as the composer intended. But despite all that emphasis I've put on the accuracy, we still need to have fun. And having fun is all about getting it right. And as we've already thought, if we've learnt how to read music and take that responsibility for ourselves, aided ably by our conductors and directors and accompanists, we can have so much more of a good time. So, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.